So everyone seems to be under the impression that the Wano arc is set to climax with the Fire Festival. This massive assault on Onigashima that all the Allied forces are planning, where everyone will unite and take down Kaido. I can tell you right now that there is absolutely no chance that the Fire Festival ends in success. If anything, we could be set up for one of the most devastating defeats in the entire series. Before getting into the reasons why the Fire Festival will end in failure, I'm just going to quickly address the obvious objection, which is that Oda has pretty much been hammering us over the head with the idea that the Fire Festival is the endgame of this arc, right? Since chapter 920, we have essentially had our mission for the arc painted out for us, that this is the grand plan, to coordinate an attack on Onigashima when the enemy is vulnerable. We have a timeline of 2 weeks given to us, and since then Oda has reinforced this idea over and over throughout various characters to the point that Oda has kind of made the reader not even think about it. Like, the final battle is spoken about so matter-of-factly that it doesn't seem like something we would question. Law and Sanji talking about how they need to play it safe till the final battle. Zoro's injured and he's talking about how this affects the final battle. Like, the way characters are talking, it's like it's a given that the final battle will be at Onigashima in 2 weeks, or 9 days from now at this point that we're at. And even text boxes have started saying, like, 9 days till the final battle. And this all takes me back to when I was a youngin', maybe 10 or so years back, and I believe that the next arc we would be getting to was Fishman Island. It's easy to forget, especially if you weren't a weekly reader at the time, but from the way characters were talking after Enies Lobby, from what the text boxes told us, from the general flow of the story, it seemed absolutely unquestionably obvious that Fishman Island would be the next destination, that this was set in stone since Enies Lobby, that they were taking the proper steps, getting to Sabaody, signing up to get their ship coding done, and even getting a nice little timeline of 3 days till Fishman Island. And we all know exactly what happened next. So the point I'm making is that just because Oda is trying to make us think one way, just because Oda is basically making characters speak as if it is a given that things will play out a certain way, just because we have been given a 2-week timeline, just because the plot seems to be moving, in a certain direction, all that doesn't necessarily mean that things will actually happen as we are being led to believe. Now, this obviously doesn't, what I'm saying right now obviously doesn't prove that the Fire Festival won't be the final battle, but this is just to say that just because we're being told it will be the final battle isn't proof that it will be either. So to get to the main points of why this grand plan is not going to go well, that's the thing. This is kind of the fundamental story setup of One Piece arcs that they tend to follow. The plan or the mission has to fail. Obviously, most stories tend to follow a structure where somewhere in the middle of the story things get worse. Things have to get worse before they get better. That's drama. There's usually a low point in any story somewhere, I guess, between the 30% mark and maybe the 70% mark of the story, right? That's fairly universal. Now with One Piece, we can look at it more specifically because it's usually the Straw Hats, specifically it's the Straw Hats getting to a new island and they have some sort of a mission. You can look at close to every big arc of the series, there's always an initial mission that the Straw Hats come in with, or a mission that develops very early on in the arc once they get to the island. So we're going to call this the fundamental mission, okay? Lots of times during an arc, there are minor, smaller missions, like in Wano, Luffy had to go rescue Tama from Hold'em, but that's not the fundamental mission, right? The fundamental mission was that we've been given is to build an alliance to defeat Kaido at the Fire Festival in 2 weeks' time at Onigashima. That's the fundamental mission, right? Now, the absolute constant of One Piece storytelling is that whatever the fundamental mission is, has to end in failure. Their initial plan or goal that they set out to accomplish does not work, at least the first time. That failure is where the drama comes from. From that failure onwards, emotion tends to rise, things get serious, the stakes get a lot higher, the heroes need to come back from the failure, and from there we get what we'll call the new mission, or it can be a renewed mission, and this usually ends in victory. So let's quickly look back at this pattern. In Alabasta, the fundamental mission is to stop the rebellion before it happens. They have to stop it before it happens. The entire story is riding on that. This is their fundamental mission. It's been stressed over and over since Drum Kingdom. When they get to Alabasta, they land on the decision that defeating Crocodile himself is the key to stopping the rebellion and accomplishing their fundamental mission. All right? So they get to Rain Base Casino, where the plan was to take him out, but they get captured. They barely make it out of there with their lives, and Luffy gets absolutely, destroyed by Crocodile. So their fundamental mission fails. From then on, the real tension of the arc starts, with the stakes way higher, since there is nothing stopping the rebellion now. The Straw Hats all come out of this defeat with a new mission to get to the capital and put an end to the fight. And this time they succeed, obviously with Luffy beating Crocodile in the end, the rebellion stopping partway through. But the point is that their initial fundamental mission, the big plan at the start of the arc, has to fail first. They think they can solve all this by going after Crocodile where he lives and beating him up, but it's not that simple. They fail, the stakes get higher, then they come back from failure, and then they succeed. In Dressrosa, an arc very similar to Alabasta, right? We all see that. It starts with their fundamental mission being to ruin Doflamingo's business, and ideally leave him to face the wrath of Kaido. That was the plan. Everyone is assigned a nice, clean job assignment at the start to follow, and everything goes wrong. The Caesar exchange turns into a mess that ends with half the crew having to run away from the conflict. Law suffers a terrible defeat and gets captured. Frankie fails to destroy the factory. The actual rebellion of the Tontadas and the toy soldier basically gets crushed. It all turns around thanks to Usopp, though from that failure onwards, the stakes get higher, as now Doflamingo activates his birdcage, and the new mission is now they actually have no choice but to go and beat Doflamingo. Point is, the initial goal fails because it always fails, right? The plan can never work as it's initially conceived. It has to fail and they get a new mission. Thriller Bark, shorter arc, their fundamental mission was to go rescue Usopp, Nami, and Chopper, who have been kidnapped. This ends in failure. They get captured, they get their shadows stolen, they fail to get Nami back. Now the stakes are higher, they have to go back with a new mission to beat Moria and get their shadows back. Whole Cake Island. Fundamental mission is to go find Sanjay, convince him to come home. Their initial attempt to get him back does not work. Ends with Luffy and Nami ending up getting captured. Brooks simultaneously gets captured. At the same time, Sanjay's own hopes and dreams are crushed as well. The fundamental mission ends with failure at around the halfway point of the arc. Then everyone escapes, reconciles, and they get a new mission with higher stakes to crash the tea party, save Sanji's family, and go up against Big Mom herself. With Water 7, the fundamental mission took a little time to develop, but it basically became to get Robin back, which actually ended in failure twice. First at Iceberg's home, and then again during the Sea Train battle, making it so that their new mission ended up being just launching an assault on Enies Lobby itself. So sometimes the fundamental mission is very simple, like in Fishman Island. They arrived with a really simple goal of getting their ship coded so they can move on. But then the incident at Ryukyu Palace happens, they become labeled criminals, and on top of this, Hordy and his crew take over. So now their mission shifts, and now it's to defeat Hordy. Even an arc as short as Arlong Park has their initial mission to get Nami to come back. Her refusal, we reach a low point, and then their new mission becomes beat up Arlong. Basically, you have to get to really short, simple arcs like Whiskey Peak or Syrup Village or something like that to not see the pattern of Straw Hats have goal towards the start of an arc, a mission to accomplish, the mission fails, then the stakes rise, and then they have to accomplish a new mission. The failure tends to be midway through the arc. Bottom line is, whatever it is that they initially set their minds to, it doesn't go as intended. It will always end in failure. This is the arc-to-arc story structure of One Piece. Now, Wano is a very special case because it is set to be such a massive arc with so many characters that the story seems like it is going to take place over a much longer period of time. So the Onigashima raid ending in failure seems weird to think about because that is still over a week away. That in itself is longer than any other One Piece arc. Even in terms of chapter count, usually in One Piece arcs, we're about 30 chapters into Wano, we would be approaching the point of failure already at this point. But really, I think what people need to keep in mind is that the story structure is not likely to change. Just because the arc is bigger doesn't mean that the pattern is being thrown out the window. We can see the same thing we see at the start of most arcs. We are given a mission, a goal. And it is not going to work because it never does. It doesn't matter that it's 2 weeks in the future and that's a long time. And really, the fact that all the characters are so confident that this will be the final battle, the fact that this seems like it is so definitely where they will have their victory, just reading things like this, characters assuming they're going to beat everyone up while they're drunk and take them out in one go, basically tells me that there is no way that this is going to be where they actually take down Kaido. And remember, this failure in their fundamental mission tends to happen somewhere in the middle section of the arc. So from the start, the timeline of the Fire Festival was 2 weeks, but on that same day, before this plan was set in stone, this plan that everyone seems so confident in, the timeline that everyone is so set on that same day, we actually got another much vaguer time frame. Hawkins gives us this prediction that Luffy's chances of being alive 1 month from now is 19%. 1 month from now. That's Gemini's box and the official Viz translation saying 1 month from now. Not at the end of the month, 1 month from now. If we assume that this is the real time frame of the arc, 1 month, then the Fire Festival being 2 weeks into the arc is basically perfectly on track to being the midway point of the arc where the initial mission would fail. I'll also just quickly address objections. Namely, didn't Luffy already suffer a defeat or failure against Kaido in the first place, fairly early on in the arc? To me, that was a very important decision by Oda, at least assuming that I am right. Having Luffy suffer a defeat, and particularly such a brutal defeat early in the arc, fools the reader into thinking that, okay, there was a failure, our hero lost. Now, next time he has to succeed, probably at this final battle that we're leading up to. Probably with the help of allies or whatever, right? But 3 things. 1. Kaido beat Luffy way, way too early. The major low point of any story needs to happen somewhere in the middle section. 2. The tone after the defeat was not what we've come to expect from major failures. Major failures that happen partway through the arc drastically change the tone, right? The stakes get higher, characters get more serious. Luffy's loss to Kaido is generally taken in stride. And 3, most importantly, Luffy getting defeated after recklessly attacking Kaido is not the same as failing in the fundamental mission. Remember, the fundamental mission that they think they're going to pull off that is set for us at the start of the arc is defeating Kaido at the Fire Festival. That's what needs to fail. Luffy losing to Kaido once along the way there is just a bump on the road. Same thing applies to what we're seeing right now. At the moment, it looks like the Alliance's plans are being uncovered and everything might be in jeopardy. Maybe for a bit it will seem like that is the major low point of the arc. You know, everyone's scrambling to keep the Alliance's hopes alive for this big raid on Onigashima. And that makes sense. Onigashima is 2 weeks away, well, 9 days from now. We still need to have some tension and conflict on the way there. Oda needs to make us feel like we're already experiencing the main struggle of the arc. But no, don't be fooled. Whatever problems they face for the rest of Act 2, and possibly for the start of Act 3, will be just bumps on the road as part of the rising action. The big low point of the arc does not come till the fundamental mission, the raid on Onigashima, fails. So that brings me to the Kabuki act structure. Quick recap for those not familiar, Kabuki plays have 5 acts. The first is called Jo, second, third, and fourth are called Ha, and then the 5th is called Kyo. Now, the first act is setup, which we got already. The 2nd through 4th acts are where the main action occurs. Now, I see a lot of people saying that everything climaxes in the 3rd act, so people are assuming that since we are in the 2nd act, that once that closes, everything will culminate in the climactic 3rd act, about a week from now, the raid on Onigashima. So that's what a lot of people assume. So actually, from what I've read, the 3rd act isn't the resolution of the plot, which is what the true final battle would be. The 3rd act is simply the most striking moment of drama or tragedy. All Ha acts, so 2 through 4, are the main action of the story. It's just that the 3rd act is where the most dramatic moment is, often a moment of great tragedy, and then the 4th act's action is meant to return everything to a more auspicious, a good state. So to be extra sure of this, I went ahead and quickly Wikipedia skimmed the summaries of 2 famous Kabuki plays, and the story definitely does not resolve in their 3rd act. And then I went and watched a video on the Kabuki structure, and it sounds like each of the Ha acts, the 2nd through 4th acts, each of those acts are action acts. That's where the meat of the story happens. It doesn't just stop with the 3rd act. The 3rd act, again, that's just where the drama or tragedy spikes. So to me, that matches up exactly what I would expect to see if the raid on Onigashima were to end in failure. As I've been saying, there's always a great failure that creates the high stakes, that takes the drama up to 11, that sounds to me like what one would expect of a third act. And the fourth act is the action that returns the story from a bad place to a good place by the time of the closing fifth act. So as I see it, this lines up fairly well if we imagine Wano to be a month long. Act 1 was only a day long, but Act 2 has basically almost reached a full week. If we imagine that Act 3 ends at the end of next week, the Fire Festival, then that basically would be the big climactic, dramatic, tragic moment that a Kabuki third act would warrant, a massive defeat that drastically changes the story. Then Act 4 would be the heroes having to rise back up from defeat, with Wano being liberated by the end of the month. Act 5 would likely be the closing chapters of an arc that we typically get. The last point I want to talk about is where this is all going down. Onigashima makes no sense for the final battle. Why? Because it's too isolated. Again, this is not how One Piece works. Whenever there is an island that needs to be saved from an evil ruler that has taken power, one of the most important things that needs to happen in the climax is the people, the citizens, the general populace of the island needs to experience the moment. Like, look through all the major arcs in the entire series where there's a big bad ruler who has taken over. Arlong Park, Skypiea, Thriller Bark, Fishman Island, Dressrosa. When the big bad evil ruler goes down, it happens in front of everyone. That's a big part of Oda's climaxes. There's a sense that the defeat resonates across the population so that everyone feels it, everyone is being freed of evil. Right now, the plan is just for a group of rebels to go ambush him at Onigashima, like a distant island. No, that doesn't fit as the resolution to this type of arc based on the way Oda likes to do things. I cannot possibly picture a scenario where a group of rebels sails over to Onigashima, successfully pulls off this plan to defeat Kaido, then sails back to Wano and tells everyone that Kaido is not the boss anymore. That's just not Oda's style. The terrible, evil, big bad, first of all, needs to be exposed for how evil he is. That always has to happen first. I feel like some of the citizens in the Flower Capital haven't gotten the memo yet. They don't really know how bad Kaido is. So first that needs to happen. And then the dramatic punch of Oda's conclusions is Luffy defeating the big bad in front of everyone. Kaido goes down in Wano, on the mainland, very possibly in the Flower Capital itself, but who really knows? It's just not happening in some isolated fight on Onigashima. To me, Onigashima is exactly what it looks like. That image to me represents certain doom. This is the dark point of the arc, the point where the fundamental mission that they set at the start of the arc ends in failure. They're going to naively sail over in the third act, halfway through the arc, overconfident in their plan, and suffer a terrible, dramatic, tragic defeat. The eventual victory will happen probably in the fourth arc, at the end of the month as initially hinted at in Wano itself. That's all for this video. If you enjoyed it, then definitely like, share, and subscribe.